What's up, my friends? I've got a new little conceptual tip that I want to share with you today that I hope will help you out. If you've spent any time working on learning the modes of the major scale or any other scale for that matter, and you've been working on the patterns and the coverage across the fingerboard, chances are you've at least been introduced to the idea of playing 3 notes per string for those particular shapes, right? So an example of one of those, for a G major scale or the G Ionian mode, played 3 notes per string starting on the 3rd fret, E string here, it would look something like this. So the advantage of a 3 note per string approach is that it gives you the most number of notes in a single position without having to shift one way or the other, right? So that's a good part of it. But it's not necessarily a very practical way to approach playing on a gig or playing a groove. And the reason for that is because we're having to maintain like a much wider span of coverage for our hand. That isn't always going to be super intuitive, and it's frankly not always going to be super comfortable to be always thinking about your hand having to cover these super wide shapes. It just doesn't really make sense because we're not going to be playing in most bass lines, we're not playing every note in the scale, right? We're playing a subset of those notes. So one of the things that I found that is really helpful is to rely on subsets of shapes to get us into more musically minded things or things that we might play that are more typical for a hand position in a performance situation. So what I like to do is take a 3 note per string pattern. I like to break it down into 2 note per string patterns. And the way that I found that is really, really cool to take advantage of is to look at each 3 note per string shape as essentially having 2 built-in 2 note per string shapes. So what I mean by that is if I'm going to analyze what this shape looks like, we've got 3 notes per string. I can look at this low note, this first note as being the low note, the second note as being like the middle note, and the third note on each string as being the high note. So when you think about that, we could break that down into just low and middle, or we could also break that down into middle and high, or we could even break that down into low and high, right? So a low to middle approach using this G Ionian shape would look something like this. And the scale degrees I'm playing are 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 1, 3, 4. Okay? Let's shift to a Dorian position. Okay, so Dorian position, 3 note per string fingering that gets used a lot is this one. If I do the same thing and I take the low and middle notes from there, it's going to look like this. Now I go to Phrygian. Okay, same thing. Low to middle, low to middle. Right, so when you carry that all the way up the octave, here's Lydian. Mixolydian. Aeolian. Locrian. So that's just using the low and the middle, right? Well, those of you that were kind of paying really close attention will realize that the middle to the high for each pattern is the same as the next low to middle that's in order of the modal series, right? So you don't really need to learn the middle to high, right? So that is a way to make more efficient use of some of these 3 note per string patterns. They can be the foundation from which you derive these from, but they can set you up for other hand positions that allow you to move more quickly through what might be more typical on a performance situation. Another great thing about this is that it basically sets you up with a pseudo-pentatonic type of approach. And this is what I mean by that. You know how with a minor pentatonic scale, for example, if I start that on G, it's going to look like this. that's a 2-note per string pattern that starts over once it gets to the octave, right? I'm playing root, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, root, right? And then from there it starts over again. Root, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1, and it keeps cycling. What's cool about these little subset patterns from the modes that I was just showing you is once you get to the octave, the series actually changes. So for this G Ionian idea again, it starts out scale degrees 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 1, but then the next string would be 3 and 4. And then if you have a 5 or 6 string bass, that you would keep going, right? So after 3 and 4, if you're on a 5 string bass, that would be 6 to 7, right? And then it would be 2 to 3. So you can see like the cycle as you move through different octaves, it actually changes the notes, the function of the notes that you're playing. So as a way to enhance your slap bass playing, like if you're a player that relies a lot on on pentatonics to play slap patterns, and because it's comfortable and it's familiar to play 2 notes per string. Think about how that can apply now to the modes of the major scale and give you 7 different 2-note per string approaches to a slap line, right? So if I'm in this Lydian position again, I've got think about how that can help you come up with other ideas, right? So if I'm using this Ionian position, right? Right? If I'm in the Dorian position, or Phrygian, Lydian. So it's just a cool, neat, efficient way to be able to shift through different shapes and still keep more of a narrow focus that might apply more to an actual performance or groove setting. Try it out. I think you'll like it. You can combine 2-note per string ideas with 3-note per string ideas and come up with some very interesting ideas. But at the end of the day, just remember, patterns are nothing more than patterns. We want to use them as ear training exercises so that we know what they sound like, so we can predictively hear an idea and then play it on the fingerboard spontaneously. All right, have fun. We'll see you next time.